Welcome, everyone. We're just getting our speakers together and we'll kick things off. And I see our room is filling up. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Faye Shapiro, Hi, Soni. Hi, I'm Faye Shapiro, publisher here at Compro.biz. And on behalf of Compro and the Center for Excellence in Public Leadership at George Washington University, welcome to Breaking Barriers, Advancing Women's Leadership in Business. We have so much to cover. I want to be really fast. And you want to hear from these extraordinary women. So housekeeping, please use the chat. We want to hear from you to pose your questions. You want to get to as many questions as possible at the end of this conversation, which I know is going to go by so fast. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll share them with our esteemed panel. And I think that is it from me. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Katerina Pietabravtova, the Director of Marketing and Partnership Building at George Washington University Center for Excellence. Katerina, thank you for the collaboration. Thank you for your support. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you to Compro for your extraordinary partnership and support. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome on behalf of GW Center for Excellence in Public Leadership, which is a part of the GW College of Professional Studies. And our mission at the center is to make a positive difference in the lives of leaders and in the organizations and communities where they serve. And with that, it has been a privilege to nurture and grow our women's leadership programs, recognizing women's extraordinary contributions, but also needs as leaders. And I'm proud to say that as of today, this Women's History Month, we have now graduated close to 200 alumna from our two women's leadership programs, and some of them are joining us here today. So with that, I'd like to play a few remarks by the Dean of our College of Professional Studies, Dr. Liesl Riddle, who really wished she could be with us today, but couldn't join us in person by Zoom, and who recorded her welcoming remarks for this webinar. So I'd like to share them now.
Welcome to our webinar on Breaking Barriers, Advancing Women's Leadership in Business. As we gather here today to celebrate Women's History Month, it's a pleasure to see many extraordinary women leaders joining us from different corners of the world. I am Dean Liesl Riddle, and on behalf of the GW College of Professional Studies and the Center for Excellence in Public Leadership, I warmly welcome each of you. I'd like to express our gratitude to Faye Shapiro and Compro. Thank you for your gracious hosting of this event. A special acknowledgement to our esteemed moderator and panelists, whose insights promise to enrich our discussion today. At the Center of Excellence for Public Leadership, or CEPL as we call it, we are committed to fostering learning communities and advancing women's leadership. Today's focus on women in the private sector aligns with our ongoing efforts to collaborate with business leaders. We aim not only to attract participants to our Executive Women's Leadership Program and Women Leaders on the Rise program, but also to explore custom program opportunities with organizational clients. As a woman leader myself with a background in international business, I understand the importance of initiatives like these. Throughout my career, I've encountered barriers firsthand, but I've also witnessed the incredible impact women can make when given the opportunity to thrive. Our women's leadership programs at CEPL have already seen remarkable success stories. From entrepreneurs to corporate trailblazers, our alumni continue to inspire by breaking barriers and achieving remarkable career milestones. Today's webinar themes of breaking barriers, career advancement, and maintaining work-life balance resonate deeply with many of us. It's not just about climbing the corporate ladder. It's about creating pathways for all women to excel in their chosen fields while maintaining a sense of fulfillment in their personal lives. As we delve into discussions and share experiences, I encourage you all to stay connected with us. Let's continue to build our learning community and support one another on this journey of leadership and empowerment. Thank you all for being a part of this vital conversation. Let's break barriers and advance women's leadership together.
Excellent. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to pass the mic to another extraordinary leader in our midst, Leslie Grossman, who is the faculty director of our women's leadership programs at GW-CEPL, and a woman who has made such a difference in my own life through mentorship and example. Thank you, Leslie. I'll pass the mic to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Katrina. I really appreciate it. I am so excited about being here today to moderate this amazing panel for leaders, really great leaders themselves. And they are leaders who have been supporting women throughout their careers, and they continue. And as leaders themselves, they have broken barriers. So they've lived it. They've lived it. They've walked the talk. They've lived it. They've learned it. They are experts, not only from their own experiences, but what they've learned as experts in their field, and because they care so much about helping women succeed. So before we get started and I introduce them, let me just remind you of statistics that you must already know, but I have to remind people. And that is that women represent more than half of the college-educated workforce. Very, very important. Yet, 1 in 5 C-suite leaders are women. 1 in 25 C-suite leaders are women of color. And as of last year, 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs were female. And 25% of those roles they got in 2023. We're hoping that doesn't go in the other direction in 2024. But because sometimes we gain and then we go back.
Mm-hmm.
So the situation is not, we've improved, right? Let's say we haven't improved. The world has improved. We have been great leaders, and research shows that women are great leaders. In fact, some of the show that in many, many ways, women are better leaders. The other thing I want you to understand is that research has also shown that the most successful corporations have more women in the C-suite, they're women CEOs, and more women on boards. In fact, the more they have in those roles, the more profitable those organizations are. And that is substantiated by research. So there is a good reason for companies to want us to succeed and to be moving us up. There are barriers that exist, not only from the companies, but often within ourselves. And those are the things that we address. We're going to be addressing today. Those are the things we also address in the programs that we do at GW. So with that, I want to introduce this amazing panel of women. I'm going to start with Soni Basi in alphabetical order, the best I can keep track, because they are all outstanding. And Soni is the Global Chief People Officer of Edelman. And I think you heard, I heard her say that, and I didn't even realize it. It's the world's largest public relations firm. So glad to know that. Now, she's been with that firm for the last few years, and she leads the firm's talent development, recruitment, and retention efforts. She partners with leaders across the entire agency network to meet the evolving and diverse needs of all their employees and clients, supports clients as well. And of course, she has a particular focus on wanting to move more women up. She's the strategic and passionate global human resource executive, guiding the creation of cutting-edge talent programs. And programs is what we need, right? Inside the organization or outside the organization that we move our leaders into. Second, I'd like to introduce Amy Coles. Amy, yes, hello. Global Head of HR and Chief Talent Officer of Finn Partners. And she's been with Finn Partners since 2019, with 10 years of human resource experience prior to that. And before that, she ran the entire department of another agency, a mid-sized PR agency in New York City. And she was on the other side of business, really working in public relations as an executive. So she has led from points of view. She understands what it's like. So welcome, Amy. And then we have next to Amy, Suzanne Ogle. Did I pronounce it right, Suzanne? And she is CEO of Southern Gas Association. Southern Gas Association is a sustainability organization. She is a sustainability and ESG executive with more than 20 years of experience operating at the forefront of social and business transformation, leading through very rapid and disruptive change. She's also a thought leader, not only on the future of energy, but also on women's leadership. And she writes about it constantly, which is published in Forbes and many other publications. So you've probably seen a lot of her writings. And she's really one of the leading women. And there's probably not too many of them in the energy industry. And she often focuses on the future and what it's going to look like. And we know that's a changing industry. And last, and definitely not least, is Tamla Oates-Forney. She is a global human resource executive, having served in some of the most major corporations, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 corporations. She's a seasoned global human resource executive. She served as executive vice president and CHRO at USAA, which is a Fortune 500 company and one of the leading insurance organizations. And before that, she served as senior vice president and chief people officer at Waste Management. And before that, a 20-year career at General Electric. In fact, when she was at GE, 20 years, during that time, made her the highest ranking African-American female executive at that time. So she is really a leader leading the way for women. And from what we understand, she will be taking on a new role, which we'll hear about soon, with a focus on women's leadership. So if you can all applaud in your seats to these extraordinary women, we are going to begin. Yes, we're going to begin by asking each of them to tell a very brief story or something about in their personal life what they experienced, what a leader they learned from, or a barrier they overcame, what they learned from it that we in this, all of us together can learn from. And I'm going to ask Tamla to start.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here to share a little bit about what I've learned, and hopefully I'll be able to impart some wisdom to you. Interestingly enough, the leadership lessons that I learned come from two distinct women. The first was my grandmother, who never went to college, barely graduated from high school, just based on her circumstances in life. And she always taught me that you teach people how to treat you. And that has stuck with me for a long time. If something is going on and people are doing things to you and you don't tell them, you never know what their intent is. And if you are silent, then you consent to how they're treating you. So that is something that stuck with me. And last, but certainly not least, the very first African-American female officer in GE, who happens to be my mentor, Deborah Edelman, taught me this. She said, being the first is an honor, but being the only is ashamed. And to me, it just tells me that to whom much is given, much is required. And as we lift as women, it is incumbent upon us to lift others up as we've climbed. And so those are two life lessons and leadership lessons that I take with me today and going forward.
Thank you so much, Tamla. Suzanne, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Just like Tamla, I think I have kind of a bifurcated approach to who created an influence on me. One of them being my mother, who was an art director for Walt Disney, and we lived in LA, drove hours and hours and hours to make sure that our family could stay where it lived, and went to school, got our master's in art, and went on for a fabulous career. But I really got a first-hand vision of what does it look like to put in the work. And then I would say one of my first business partners, who was a man, as you're rising, you want to do things in a way that's influential and has the most impact. And he gave me some of the best advice I ever received, which was, you can turn the knob, you don't have to kick the door down. And so learning to temper my my drive was critical for my success.
Wow, thank you. And it sounded also to turning that door also is even how we come across, right, Suzanne?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Amy.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Leslie mentioned, in my career, I've had two distinct career paths. One as a PR practitioner and one as a HR lead. But on each path, of my career, I was fortunate enough to have a supervisor who really became a mentor. They saw my potential, at different points, and they gave me the opportunities to succeed. And I think what's noteworthy for this conversation today is that those two mentors were men. And what that taught me was the importance of allyship. And really, when working with people, different perspectives and ways of doing things are vital to business success.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Soni.
Thank you, Leslie. So good to be here. I've always been really lucky, I would consider myself, and grateful to have had so many women leaders in my career. And I've always valued their investment in me. And I think what makes them also unique, and I couldn't pick just one or two, is that they were always active champions of my success, right? They gave me stretch assignments. They tested my limits. And while I was in those experiences, I always had this weird experience of am I cut out of the same cloth as these fabulous women leaders who are in the C-suite? But when I finished those assignments, I found myself feeling that I was indeed a peer. And yes, I was cut from the same cloth. They gave me visibility. And I think that's one of the most important lessons I've learned, is my responsibility as well to give others visibility. And that has really formed my mission in life, which is to create opportunities for others.
Thank you, Soni. Soni, I'm going to have you continue a little with this and maybe address the first question. And we're going to have this as a conversation. So I'm going to ask our amazing panelists to feel free to jump in a little bit so that we can kind of hear. But the first thing I really want to find out about, is, we're looking at things starting to change, right? The older generation, baby boomers, are maybe retiring or will be retiring in the next 5 or so years. And the younger generations are needed. We need to support young women and men, but we're talking about women today, to really move them up into the leadership roles and have them learn what they need to do. So I want to hear from you about what advice you would give women and those perhaps managing women to how to navigate those challenges and take those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And Leslie, I didn't hear you mention Gen X in your question. And so as somebody who's solidly in the Gen X category as well, just want to make sure we cannot overlook or even forget about the Gen X in the workplace. They or we are all influential in our roles at various levels of leadership. And I think to your point, we all have a real responsibility in how we address the next generations. I think to your point, there are several challenges right now that I'm sure that my fellow panelists would also be aware of and thinking about. I think for ambitious women, navigating career growth can be a real challenge, depending on where they work and who they work with, and the type of work environment that supports or maybe the opportunities. It can be really frustrating for goal-oriented women if their organization's career culture is not really strong, right? If it's a little bit on the weaker side and that there's no real guidance for managers and leaders on how to build skills and grow. So I think number one is having very clear pathways, mentors, and others that you can go to. And it sounds like we've all had those in our careers. I think in terms of opportunities as well, organizations really have an opportunity to look at their people with fresh eyes. And I think one of the simplest things that a manager can do is sit down and have a conversation with someone. And when I think about the most powerful conversations I had, it may have been over a coffee chat with one of my leaders when I really got to know him or her well. We took the time out. They got to know me on a personal level, and they got to know me more on a professional level. And they asked me questions that I hadn't really even considered myself, like, what really motivates you? Are you motivated by money? Are you motivated by a title? Are you motivated by having opportunities to do things outside of work? Like, what is it that motivates you? And I think having those very real conversations enables you to start thinking about what the next generation needs one at a time. And then systematically, I can talk a little bit more about programs that we've been doing at Edelman that I think really help to support the next generations of leaders, such as International Women's Forum. We've been a huge supporter of International Women's Forum for years, and having individuals go through that program and bring some of the learnings back into the workplace. So maybe I'll just stop there because others may want to add to what I've just shared, but it can be very simple, right? Sometimes it just comes down to having a very thoughtful conversation with someone.
Yeah, and I'm glad you shared that, Soni, because conversations are so critical and they're getting harder to have with the way people work today. Suzanne, do you want to add to Soni? I know that was an area that you've been particularly focused on.
Yeah, I think I was over here making a few notes as she was talking, because every time you talk, Soni, I think of something that I think is interesting. But I think the investing in people in their career path is a really important conversation, because I think it's okay to give people permission to explore what that career path looks like and not have it look like a ladder, but maybe more of a jungle gym. So you're moving around. You can move laterally, you can move up, but really what you want to do is you want to build that skill set base that you have and that 360 understanding of business, because the more that you understand business from an operations, a HR perspective, a legal perspective, the better steward you could be of the business. And so I think that's really important.
Can I opine just a little bit? Because I think the one thing that we really need to lean into is that the world of work as we once knew it is being disrupted for everyone, not just for Gen Zs or, baby boomers or Gen Xers like ourselves. The world of work is being disrupted. So that is a common ground. And oftentimes when we talk about a generation over the other generation thinks it is at their exclusion. But we need to bring all the folks together to talk about, what are the things that we collectively have in common? What are the business goals and objectives, and how can we work together to achieve them, even if how we achieve them looks different? I think bringing the groups together is something that I found to be the most impactful and effective, because when you're not at the table, you think that you are being discriminated against or disadvantaged in some way. And again, the workplace in its entirety is being disrupted. And honestly speaking, we don't really know what the careers of the future are going to be, we need to be focusing on the skills that exist and how do we help organizations, individuals, no matter their generation, obtain those skills so that they are competitive for a future that is not yet here. So I would just encourage us to think a little differently in terms of how we gather together all generations to talk about the disruption that's happening across the board and how can we collectively approach it and continue to, rise all boats, in terms of skill development.
Yeah, I'll just note,
Sorry.
on that note, we keep talking about how we're not in person, right? So communication is disrupted. I'll use your word, Tamla, because it's perfect. I'm of the opposite mind. I think a key to success today is to be flexible. We have so many communication tools at our disposal. I think it's a matter of optimizing them, right? And knowing how to communicate with each person on your team and your organization. But yeah, those conversations certainly can still be had. Soni.
Sorry to speak over you, Amy. I was just going to pick up on the skills conversation. I do think it's so critical what each of you have outlined. I often talk about skills as the currency within the workplace. I know compensation will always be important, and even why people work has changed now. And so compensation comes into that. But I talk to our teams about what skills are you learning? What skills are transferable, fungible, regardless of where you go? So I do think that is a really important piece of what you hone in on. Sometimes, absolutely, as women, the title can also really matter because a title can keep you from a meeting room or it can get you into a meeting room. So absolutely get that as well. But skills is real important currency.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this idea of bringing people together. Who initiates that? When we're talking to women that are listening and they're at different levels of their organization. So how can we make that happen? What are your thoughts on that, making that happen?
So if I may, I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, Amy, guys.
No, I'm sorry, everybody. No, I'm sorry. Just
I'll turn it over to you, Tamla. I was going to say, anecdotally, I supervise a global team. So even pre-pandemic, we were all over the world. And again, talking about these tools at our disposal, it's intentional. For me, coming into the role at Finn, I made it a point to have regular scheduled team meetings, one-on-ones, opportunities to bring people together, even virtually. So there is an intention there. That's required, and I think it starts there. And I also think that communication too is outlining expectations. When do you expect people to be dialed into work? How do you expect them to communicate with you? Like, be very clear about what tools you're using to communicate, right? And then, where they might have flexibility in their day, or like, do you expect them to be on call and, available to answer questions? So there is some intent to it. And I say, if you are a leader or want to be a leader, set that schedule, set that course, lean into it. Tamla?
Amy, you said mostly everything I was going to say, but I wanted to make sure that we say, when you bring people together, it has to be something that inspires, motivates, empowers them, et cetera. You have to give them something to come for, or to join for, or to engage in. Sometimes people meet for the sake of meeting and you don't get anything out of it. And I think people make time for things that are of value to them. And so when we're bringing people together, it needs to be of value, that they're coming together for that reason. But I also think it can't be kind of a one-size-fits-all model. It can't be all coming together in person. It can't be coming together all the time online. I think you have to meet people where they are in some cases and take them where you want them to go, but give them and empower them to also be a part of creating that camaraderie amongst the team versus you dictating what that camaraderie is going to be. If they have a level of engagement in that, I think they will be better served and they'll be more attentive and making it worth their while.
So Tamla, I think that one of the things that you said is important, right? As a leader, you have to really adapt your leadership style to fit the needs of your team and help them draw inspiration from the way you're meeting. And I always say that your network is your net worth in business. And so when you get together, being intentional about the connections you create. And then one other thing I think is whether you have to think about and help your team develop exactly as they want to, because if somebody wants to be remote all the time, there's a space for an individual contributor that's remote. If you want to be a leader, you got to get together with people, and you've got to deal with people on a regular basis, touching, feeling, understanding, and helping them develop. And so there's two different skill sets that are required, and there's positions for all of that.
Okay, very good. These are great ideas and great strategies that we all need to be looking at and using if we're not already using them. So let's look at, and I think Tamla, we talked a little bit about the broken rung, which McKinsey identified about the fact that women, we fall behind early in our careers because the numbers show that many more men move into management positions sooner than women do. What do you think, and this might be something for all of you to talk about, how do we change that? How does, from both the side of the company, but also from a woman's point of view, if we feel that we're, being overlooked, is there action we can be taking? So who would like to address that? Or maybe Tamla, you start with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday as I was preparing for this meeting. Oftentimes, when you do special programs for women and things like that, some men, not all, because I've had amazing men, including my husband in my life, that have helped me get to the point where I am. They think we're taking something away from them to help women. And so I was thinking about this metaphorically. You have a ceiling, right? And I think most oftentimes men are taller than women. So they already come in at an advantage because they're closer to the ceiling than we are. So what if we gave, I'm just thinking about this metaphorically, if we gave a woman a stepping stool, it's not taking anything away from the man. We gave the woman a stepping stool to make her on equal footing as the man. It's not taking anything away from him, but it's giving her the same advantage that the man genetically was born with. And if we think about it that way, it's not taking anything away from you or giving the woman an unfair advantage. It's making sure she is on equal footing to get to the ceiling. Oftentimes, women are trying to climb, and we have a lot of stuff in our backpack, including a baby in our belly. And it is really, really hard to reach this ladder. I am so blessed and fortunate that my husband took away some of the things out of my backpack so that as I was climbing, it wasn't as heavy. Right? Men, if you could think that way, it would be very helpful, and we are different. So let's just say that men and women are different genetically. We are different. But how do we create equality, not at the exclusion of men, but for the benefit of women to make sure that we're equal footing? And if we look at it that way, I think we'll be better served because we're not putting men at a disadvantage. We're just trying to give women the same opportunities to compete in order to get to the ceiling. When we have so many things that we're carrying, we may need a little help to balance it all. And I think if you look at it that way, instead of we're taking something away or we're getting something that's unfair, let's look at it as how do we help women have the same opportunity to get to the ceiling as men who are genetically predispositioned to be closer to the top. Mm-hmm. And that helped me frame that. And I'm grateful for the men in my life. Like I said, number one, my husband, for helping me carry that baggage that I was carrying as I was trying to climb the ladder. And I was at a disadvantage, both as a female and both as a woman of color. So that's kind of how I think about it. Companies can help women.
I like that metaphor.
So, one thing I was just thinking, the baggage you talked about, and I was thinking, and I reflected back on mine. I adopted my son, and so I wanted to be a really good mom. And I think one of the things in my baggage was this guilt about having to have a nanny because I traveled, right? So whether it's really the obligations of your role or whether it's your guilt. And so I think that goes back to what you said, Leslie, about giving yourself permission and giving yourself some grace in the situation as you navigate it.
That's right.
Suzanne.
Go ahead, Soni.
So, thank you. Over to you next then. I was thinking about that as well. Just a couple of thoughts and reactions. At some point, as I was talking to a new mom who wanted to take on a job, but it was a commute for her to come into the city. We were having these conversations, and she asked me, "Well, you're a single mom. How did you navigate this? You're in a big job. And I said to her, anything is possible, but you have to realize you can't be perfect in anything, right? And everything. And I made those decisions early on about where I wanted to be and when I needed to be there. So for example, I said, every year I will always go to one, I'll be the parent at one of the class trips. Right? That was always going to be my commitment, that I was visible in the classroom and I was there, and my son would always remember that I was there on one of the class trips. But I wasn't going to be the mom that could be there for everything. And so I made my decisions of where I wanted to be and needed to be. From an organizational standpoint, I just wanted to layer into your comments there, Tamla, that I think about we throw out DEIB almost like it's a word, right? But it's not. Each of them are different words. And the D and the E, which is what you're talking about here, Leslie, with the broken rung, can only be impacted by people who have decision-making rights in an organization about who gets promoted, who gets hired, what compensation is given. The I and the B is everyone's job. Right? Everyone can make somebody feel included and belonged, but we have a responsibility, especially if we're in HR or we're leaders, to be looking at the data and to be holding people accountable when we see that certain classes, whatever they are, women, people of color, are not advancing to the same degree as others in the organization.
It's a great segue though, because I'm going to address the diversity and equity component from a business standpoint. And I can speak, from experience at Finn, and Tamla, you mentioned, from a business perspective, what can we do to give that little step stool, to create equality? And I think that starts with management, decision makers, recognizing the life experiences that are uniquely female and how those impact the work. And when possible, you have policies that address them. And have flexibility to change your policies to address them. And I'll use two examples, at Finn. Small but big impact. We recently changed our compassionate leave policy, for example, time off, to include more reasons that you can take it, including pregnancy loss, for example. Again, small, but it can have a big impact. And then when there was the impact with Roe v. Wade, being repealed, overturned, we took a look at our health insurance benefits to make sure that women who needed certain reproductive health care could get it, even if that meant traveling or what have you. So again, small things, but important to the decision makers to ensure that we could, our female employees at least felt, included, belonged, sense of safety and security, because those things impact their work and their job.
Absolutely.
So, I want to ask you a question following up on this theme on the broken run, and it actually goes even beyond the broken run. What is it that women can do that might allow them to have their own step stool, so to speak? I know that in our program, one of the things that we have found is that women often underestimate how good they really are. And they look to be perfection before they even put their name in for a new position. And that's one of the things that we try to address, is showing them to put their name in and for promotions that they might not quite think they're 100%, because maybe they don't need to be 100%. And the statistics show that. What are your thoughts on that and other things that women themselves should consider doing to carry their own step stool, so to speak?
I think the first thing that we have to do is declare what our needs are, because sometimes people assume what you want, what you need, what you desire, and it may not be accurate. So I think you have to first declare what it is you want, what it is you need, and what can you do, and what you need from the company in order to support you. And oftentimes, and you said this, Leslie, we don't speak up regarding what our passions and desires are. And when we are overlooked, remember what I said, my grandmother said, you teach people how to treat you, and silence becomes consent if you don't say anything. So I think the first thing is to use your voice and your sphere of influence to make a difference and actually to make sure that your needs are known. And obviously the power of the collective is very powerful. So leverage the network of people, not just women, but people around you, to make sure that people understand what your desires and passions are. So that would be the first thing I would recommend.
Yeah, thank you, Tamla. Anyone have something to add to that?
I think it's interesting because I mentor a lot of younger people, and I laughed when you talked about the broken run, because some of them are in a group they call, I won't use the acronym, but anyway, they're young professionals. And, you time out of that organization at 35 or 40. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, I was just getting going. Man, I'm on my roll now, but at 35, 40, what do you mean you're out of that young organization? Because I still think I'm young. But I think it's really, when you think about that, how do you, I get in there and I mentor them, and they're, to your point, Tamala, they don't know what their passion is. They don't know what their purpose is. And I think it really starts younger, is to have people explore different ideas and purposes and passions and find that. Don't just go down a road because that's the safe, secure road. This is a journey, and you need to be confident to stretch. And I mean, Soni, you said that to start with, like, stretch as much as you can stretch. And you know what, if you're on the journey and you're the lowest person as far as experience on that journey, there's nothing wrong with that. You're still in the journey.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would
Go ahead.
Sorry, Leslie. I was just going to add in that, the personal advocacy cannot be more underscored. The number of times that I will hear men speak up and say, of course I'm ready for this job. Like, and women, will often say, well, I don't think I have the technical skills that are really needed. And so when, even as we're looking at our career pathways at Edelman, one points of advice that the rest of the team gave me is just take off the technical skills, right? Because it can be limiting for individuals. That can be raised in a conversation. When somebody gets more comfortable, we can give them the tools that they need, but the business skills are really what's most important. But once you are advocating for yourself, be very clear on what it is that your goals are. I think one of the things I've found is when a woman might say oh, well, I'm going to apply for 3 or 4 roles. And we're like, okay, well, that's not necessarily the way to go, right? Be really intentional about what your goals are and be thoughtful about what you raise your hand for and what you don't raise your hand, because it's always sending a signal. So that would be my additional piece of advice.
Great advice. Carrie Broussard asked the question, what recommendations do you give women in negotiations? If we ask for more salary, benefits, promotion, should we take no for an answer?
Well, you have to be realistic about the job and the role and the salary, right? I mean, number one, you need to do your research and understand what's the bandwidth for that and what's your level. People, I find, often overestimate where they are. So if you're in a position, you could be in a position where you're in your infancy in your skill set in that position, or your ability in that position, and you can grow. And it doesn't even need to be title or anything else. It's growing in your maturity and your experience in that position. And so I'll tell you a story. Well, I was negotiating for a chief commercial officer position, and they were trying to get my salary down. And I said, well, don't you want me to be able to negotiate for the top sales revenue for you? And so don't take me down, because I'm negotiating for myself right now, just like I'm going to negotiate for you. And I got the salary I asked for. But you have to also be equipped and in that same position and ready for that.
Right. Great advice. Great advice, Suzanne.
And research is really important, right? So when you're advocating for yourself, do your research. The salary bands are being posted on job descriptions, so you have a good understanding. Talk to your network, and don't be afraid to go in asking. And then if you are told, it's going to be a little bit less, or it's going to be this or that, then you know where your starting point is, and you know what your standards are as well for what you need and what you want.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the hybrid and the remote working. What are, we're hearing different things from companies, but we know that we need people to have conversations, right? You talked a little bit about that. What kind of advice would you give women if they have the options of doing it, which hopefully they do, because flexibility, we know, is what women want. But flexibility means keeping certain things in mind too, so that you are present to the people that matters. What thoughts do you have on that?
I'll
Maybe
jump in.
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
As I say, and again, as I mentioned before, I mean, I've been managing I consider remote group for a while now. And I think first and foremost, it's aligning on expectations at the beginning, very clearly articulating what's expected, where you need to be, when and how, right? And I think, at least in our situation, mine specifically at Finn and Finn in general, it comes down to trust. Do you trust your team, your employees to get the job done, be where they need to be? I actually think that physical proximity in office work gave us a false sense of trust, back in the day. So we do need to, in some way, rebuild that, if you will, with now all of these virtual arrangements. But overall, I think the key thing initially, align on expectations, let the work speak primarily.
However,
let me just comment.
Okay, I was gonna, before you answer, Tamla, let me just say, the thing that's missing though, those opportunities to, if you're remote, 100% remote, the opportunities to drop in on somebody's office, have a conversation, share some of the things you recommended, about where you want to go, which if you're reporting to somebody who's not asking you the questions that Soni shared, so how do you make up for that? And I don't know, Tamla, I know you were going to share, and can you answer to that as well as
And I honestly don't think you can. I mean, human connection is a powerful thing, and it can't be, it can't be duplicated. Yes, you can have connection via Zoom and things like that, but the power of human connection is just that. It's very powerful. I think there are companies that have landed on what their rules of engagement are. And if you are intending to join that company, you should understand what those rules of engagements are and not try to go into the company to change them, right? Mm-hmm. You also have to be very clear about what your rules of engagements are and the things that are non-negotiable for you. And make sure you do your homework in terms of the company, the culture, the working environment, et cetera, and make sure it's really aligned with where you are as an individual. There's nothing wrong with companies saying we're going back to 100% in the office. That's their company's culture. It doesn't mean that that is the company culture for you. There are some companies say 100% remote. And if that's where you want to be as an individual, those are the types of companies that you should see. It's not good, bad, or indifferent. It just is going to be a different way of working. And I think the clearer we are about what those rules of engagement are, I think the more sanity we will have. Oftentimes we try to get in and change the rules, but the rules are the rules. And hopefully you know the rules before you sign up for being a part of that organization. So I just encourage you to make sure that you kind of list what are your non-negotiables in terms of your employer EVPs, employer value propositions that you're seeking, and seek companies that are aligned to that. It'll save you a lot of heartache and pain. But again, I believe in the power of connection, but I also believe that in the power of flexibility. That is the world we live in. And I ultimately think that companies that aren't flexible, even though it's their right, they will be at somewhat of a competitive disadvantage to not have the applicant and talent pool that they need in order to be the best company that they are ultimately seeking to be.
I just was thinking as you were saying that, I think that I agree with you 100%. I think the power of connection can't be replaced. Although one of the things I do is I have coffee hours. And so I just get on there and let anybody come in so they can have more of an informal conversation at any time that they want. But I still don't think that's a solve for it. But I think one of the things you hit on is the most important is don't go accept something and then be resentful, because how you're going to get ahead. Show up and be an absolute outstanding performer and have a growth mindset and learn. And then you show up and you're resentful, that's always going to come out in some way. Right. You can't change. You have to just say, this is for me, this isn't for me. And then go find the right environment where you could flourish.
Absolutely.
And I would just echo the comments about flexibility. And that word flexible, I think, is just such an important word in our new version of, how we work, where we work, and why we work. So at Edelman, we are 3 days a week in office around the world. We feel like it's very important for everything we just said, for connecting, collaborating. We're creative industries, so for co-creating, but also for celebrating, which I think sometimes gets forgotten. But we are a culture where we like each other and
That's
we
right.
want to spend time with each other. And we want to celebrate the wins, and people have seen families grow up and get married and so on, right? And it's beautiful. But I just want to hone in on that word flexible, because I think about how many hours we log on from home on the weekends or in the evenings. And there's a stigma if you have to go out for a doctor's appointment, or you want to run out for your child's game, or whatever it is that you want to do during the workday. But we take time out of our quote unquote personal lives, right, for our work. And so I would just say the more and more it's integrated. And so the more you can feel comfortable saying, stepping out and having a coffee with a friend for an hour, I'm going to come back, I'm going to be rejuvenated, I'm going to feel good about myself. It's the same as you taking an hour after dinner when you'd rather be playing a game or something with the family and doing a work call, right? So it's more and more about that flexibility and that integration. And I would urge us all to be really thinking about the blend of the two.
Yeah, and that's where flexible is in my notes numerous times.
Yeah.
And I will say that's what I meant by, in this environment, you let the work speak for itself, because that's really the determinant of, is it working? Are you meeting deadlines? Are you producing the work? To your point, Soni, so to me, if that means I have team members who need to take some time in the middle of a day, fine, right? I'm not judging them for that, right? Ultimately, we're in a business. They're going to be evaluated on what's the work product, and I have found that when you have that flexibility, the work product is better. It's like, better, more thought out, right? Because you've given them the flexibility to produce that, on their time, to integrate work-life balance, et cetera.
There's a couple more questions I'd like to get out based on what I'm seeing in the chat. Don't have a whole lot of time, but quickly, the flexibility also relates to mental health and health issues, particularly for women, because let's admit, with women, we have more things that we go through our bodies, not just pregnancy, menopause, perimenopause, all those things. So what are you seeing? How do women deal with that in terms of in the corporation? What suggestions, thoughts do you have about that? Women that may be experiencing these kinds of issues and stress. Any thoughts on that?
Maybe I can just jump in. I see, Amy, you come out from mute, so hand over the mic to you in a minute. But I think first of all, overall mental health is really challenging for everyone. I think it continues, and whatever we can do in our organizations to support people's mental well-being, to really destigmatize the conversations around mental health is key. And I've been hearing more and more people feeling open about the conversations around mental health. I'm really proud of the work we've been doing at Edelman in particular. Ruth Edelman, who was Dan Edelman, the founder's wife, suffered from various mental health conditions over the years. And we actually internally relabeled World Mental Health Day as Ruth Edelman Day, as a day of recognition within the organization, and as part of our commitment and our belief in people being mentally well, right, and doing what they need to do for their wellness. So that's number one. I think number two, as it relates to women's health, I do agree, Leslie, that this is becoming a bigger part of the conversation, and I'm so pleased to hear that. In the advertising industry, I saw recently something coming up as like, everyone take the Meno clause and really put that into our benefits packages, that we will all do something to advocate for menopause care. And so that's something we've done in the UK within our own benefits programs and are looking at for the US business next year.
Very good. Let me ask, with the 5 minutes left, question about allyship that has come up and mentorship, which you, some of you have talked about. And I think that women often don't know how to go about finding an ally or a mentor. It's not like you find that people that are great mentors, everybody wants them to mentor them, right? So what do you think the best way a woman can effectively begin to have a relationship? Both are very different. Somebody might want to explain the difference between ally and mentor, and then talk about a little bit about what's the best way to find a mentor if it isn't offered to you through your HR program.
What I found, let me just comment on it just a little bit. What I found, and this is not like, you know, Tamla's law of order, if you will, and it's applicable to everybody. But the mentoring relationships that I found that have been the most valuable to me are the ones that were not orchestrated by others. It was those mentoring relationships that happened naturally. And what I also found is that the most successful mentoring relationships that I've had, both being the mentor and the mentee, was where there was mutual benefit, right? So I was giving just as much as I was getting, and vice versa. So really seek those mentors that you have some interest in being mentored by, but also, you know, that you can give something in return. Because I got to tell you, it can be, especially for senior women, exhausting to mentor so many women when no one's pouring into you, or many people, not just women, because I mentor men as well, but you're giving, and no one's filling your cup. So seek those that are, you know, that you have an interest in, and that you can offer something to them just as much as you can get something from them. Those have been the most successful for me. Not saying that the more formal programs don't work, because they could be the introduction to something that's wonderful, but the ones that tend to last for me, and in my experience, has been those that have been mutually beneficial. So seek that.
That's great advice. And also in general, even in networking, right?
Yeah,
we
yeah.
need to be givers as well as asking for people to do for us. And that's
right.
That collaboration, the give and the take, is where it's the most successful. So that's
absolutely
great advice, Tamla.
I think there could be a more informal mentorship it's where you are a studier of somebody that you admire.
Yes.
And so that doesn't even require anything. So I'm watching these women here, and there's other women, and there's people everywhere. And I'm like, you know, I really like the way she said it. I like the way she frames that. And so you can internalize that and then study it and almost mentor yourself in a way by
I love that.
finding people that inspire you.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. It is really, it's something that we might not think about, is really being observing and saying, how can I take that on myself? Make that part of me. Great, great. Any other thoughts on that? Then I'd like to just, in the last couple minutes, have each of you maybe give a closing thought. Perhaps it's something that came up that you didn't get a chance to say because you all have so much to share, and you've been extraordinary. But anything closing that you would like to leave our wonderful group of women that are part of this webinar with?
I would just say my closing thought would be take every opportunity you can to learn and grow. And, you know, whatever that looks like for you, but there's always an opportunity to increase how you show up or how you show up for people. And that is how you have to be self-reflective in that.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I would say opportunities never go away, but they go to the people who are ready. So build your skill set and be ready for when the opportunity comes your way.
Great.
Mine is very similar to that. I was going to say, when you're given a seat at the table, make sure that what you're serving is something that people want to eat.
Yeah, it's a common theme. Mine is show your confidence. You have it, show it, and lean in. See if the door is ajar, lean in, or even open that door. Take the opportunity when it's in front of you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for this is wonderful. I mean, we have so happy to bring this conversation to the Compro community. These are the kind of conversations we have at the GW Executive Women's Leadership Program, in addition to the programming that we have, which is all about leadership development and breaking those barriers, internal and external. Just so everyone knows that is on this webinar, our next Executive Women's Leadership Program is May 1st through 3rd. It's all on online live, very interactive. And then we have a Women Leaders on the Rise program starting also in early May. And anyone that was part of this webinar, if you register and you put Compro as your reference, gets a 10% reduction on their fee. So we'll be sending you a link, and actually Katrina put a link up in the chat for you to check out the program. And also I urge women to go, if it's a program you want to take, either invest in yourself, but you can also take it to your HR and say, I want to take this program, because men do that all the time. They say, I want to take this program. It's leadership development. So don't be afraid to speak up. And if hopefully you'll get a yes. And if you don't, look at, do I want to invest in myself? I've been, as an entrepreneur, a lot of my life, I've been investing in myself because I had nobody else to pay for it. And it made all the difference in my life. So thank you all. Thank you for sharing such wisdom today. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Katrina. Faye, you want to close out?
Leslie, thank you. Just to reinforce everything you said, I'm invigorated, as we all are, from today's panel. Thank you to our wonderful participants. Thank you to you. Thank you to Katerina. And thank you to the school. And thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. It's been an honor. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.
All the best,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.